All right, so we're going to do a Q&A, I understand. Did anybody have any questions? There's a microphone here.
If you guys have questions, just make a row here or a line in the center.
Thank you very much. I would like to point out, point out to people here that if you're not familiar with cladistics, which is what Aron is talking about, this is what's more and more museums are starting to use on their signage. If you go into their like paleontology sections, for example, I was at the American Museum of Nature and Science about 3 years ago in New York, and for every specimen of dinosaur or whatever, extinct animal, they had a cladogram as part of the signage, so you could see the relationship and what the common ancestry of the animal was. So, yeah, this is not that new. It's maybe 20 years, but thank you for bringing this forward, because it is something we're going to see more about when you go to museums, for example. So,
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Was that a question?
Well, no, I'm sorry. I just really want to, because it sounds kind of esoteric, but it's gonna get more into the common parlance, I think, eventually. So.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you. When you're talking about the project you're working on that has one of the largest sets of classifications and species on there, do you see areas in it that suggest there should be something there that we should be looking for? Or can that help determine where to possibly look for new types of species or classifications?
One of the ones that I brought up is I don't think that scorpions are arachnids the same way that spiders are. I see both of them emerging, both spiders and scorpions emerging out of eurypterids, because there are a number of eurypterids that are very close to being scorpions, and there's a number of them that are very close to being spiders. And there's the Mesothelae is an Asian type of spider. There's like three categories the three biggest categories of spiders. Mesothelae is one of them. And although there are not many species left, they have the segments on their abdomen that you would have seen like on a scorpion, if that's what it had evolved from. So there's evidence that that is the case. So Mixopterus is the closest eurypterid that I know of to what a modern scorpion is, and so I would suspect that we should be looking for Mixopterician eurypterids to fill that gap to scorpions. But people in the field tend not to agree with this idea, and that's fine. I can be completely wrong. That's why we want to find evidence to see if I am. I've been wrong before. Yes, sir.
How has and how will genetic analysis inform and affect your classification system?
The genome is it's like that Maury Povich show when you've got a resemblance. There's these things that look like they're related, but you have to do that test to find out if you're the father or not. And that's the genetic tests have confirmed or actually corrected a number of things already. Once upon a time, for example, because aardvarks, pangolins, and anteaters all lack teeth, we thought that this was a convergent, that they'd all inherited the loss of teeth. They all eat ants, right? So we thought that this was a relation. So we thought that all of these three were related. But genetically, it turns out that the aardvark is closer related to elephants, and pangolins are more closely related to carnivores, if that makes any sense. We could never have guessed that by their morphology. Pangolins are scaled. The hell's that like a carnivore? But genetically, they are closer to that. Bats were once classified as primates. Some of them, not all of them. Microchiroptera were associated with shrews, and Megachiroptera were associated with primates, and were like the flying colugos and everything. They thought there was a relationship there because morphologically it looks like there is. But then you get the genetic test back, and the genome says, nope, this is a monophyletic group, and it's completely separate. It's not even in the same... I don't know how to summarize this. It's not anywhere near the category that we thought it was. So I hope that answered the question. Yes, sir.
Hi. The group formerly known as Codiosaurs, what is that monotaxon known as now?
They're stem, you say Cotylosaurs?
Codiosaur, yeah.
Okay, so those are stem reptiles, and they can be basal sauropsids, and No, basal Tuceropsids. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little confused because the cotylosaurs are the transition of the traditional colloquial understanding of amphibians and reptiles. So some of that collective are too reptilian to be amphibious, and they were once classified as amphibians, but now they had to change that condition. I don't think they're using cotylosaurs anymore.
What is the word they use now?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I have to apologize. I can't. I tried to remember, but I just drew up trying.
Aron, I
Yeah.
am so fortunate to meet you today and for you to be here. It's like awesome. Hey, I want to tell you something. My daughter and me both. Can you hear me? No? Hello. Actually, I just want to say thank you for being here today. It means a lot to me. My daughter and I both have this hole in the above our ear. I said to my daughter, I said, that's an alien hole. But I know it has something to do with fish, right? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I hope so. Thank you.
Yeah. I mentioned it in the systematic classification of life video series that one of the hypotheses is where that hole comes from, that some people have this extra hole above the oral canal. There's just a pinhole that is believed to be a vestigial trait of gill development. And that's where they think that hole came from. That's only a hypothesis. It's the only thing that could explain that. We don't otherwise know why some people have that hole in their ear.
Well, at least there's an answer for it. Like
Potentially. Can't be sure.
Thank you.
So I'm sure all of us have heard of like the SETI project with their crowd, computing stuff, and there's the protein folding project with their crowd computing stuff. Is there any sort of plans for a crowd computing assistance for you guys at all, or is there anything that the community can do that would be similar to crowd computing to help your project?
Crowd computing?
Yeah, where basically you share your processor time like overnight to kind of help compile some stuff or, do the graphics or anything like that. So,
well, we're doing 3 stages of this, and the first is the data entry, where all of the volunteers have to cite the resource material, the peer-reviewed articles to show where things belong. The second stage is going back and filling in encyclopedic information on these. So this is all very manual. I don't see how computing has much to do with it. I mean, we've got a dozen or so engineers that put the cladogram together, and it is a brilliant program for what it can do. It's the second one we had to do. The first one we did, as soon as we started putting in something like 10,000 species, the whole thing collapsed. So we had to build something that could be monolithic and still be functional.
okay.
Yeah, and so I don't see how we could do a crowd computing thing. And then the next stage that we're doing after that is to get the scientific community involved. We want scientists to use it. And I don't know if anybody's ever tried to use Wikipedia for this kind of thing, but if you look on a cladogram on Wikipedia and click on any of the links provided in that cladogram, it'll take you to other cladograms that contradict that one or that don't match it.
Yeah.
So that's irritating, right?
It's very irritating, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have options when there are competing ideas, when there's viable hypotheses that contradict. We can make reference to those, but we're taking the one. There's always a preference. There's the one that is the mainstream or the consensus or the more popular idea, and we'll go with that until new research implies something else. And the beautiful thing about the way this program is devised is we can move anything and all of its daughters in a single motion, whereas every other prior construct, if you had to change something like I was mentioning about relocating bats to another part of the tree, if you're trying to do any other kind of representation of the cladogram, that would take hours of manual work to redraw everything.
Right.
And now we've just got a program that just does it.
I see, okay. Thank you.
Hi. I was wondering, you said one of the categories had animals that could see in color, and given the philosophical question, like how do I know that your red is my red? How do we know that other animals can see in color?
Well, I'm losing the biology. What is it, cones? Is it cones or rods? Yeah, I mean, if it's not present in another animal, then they can't see color, because that's the thing that does it. It's just the mechanics.
So if they lost their eyesight, would they use color as something else, or is color irrelevant then?
I'm sorry, what?
So like how snakes lost their legs, but they're
Okay.
still reptiles. Things that can see in color that would then, like say they lived underground and they lost their vision or something, would color be a feature of the eye, or is color a feature of the brain that the animal has then?
If they can't see at all, I don't understand how.
Like in Thomas Nagel's book, What It's Like to Be a Bat, there's the idea that they see or that they hear in color potentially. Is that not like?
I heard things in color once.
yeah, right, sure, yeah. yeah.
Once.
Not doing that again.
Is there just a way to know for sure that an animal can see in color? I guess is what I'm asking. That
Yeah,
what they're seeing is red.
Well, we can't tell if they're red. It looks like our red, or in some cases we can tell if you have a certain gene, then cilantro will taste like soap.
Okay.
We've established, there's some indicators as what things taste like, but we'll never know if what I tastes the same to me as what you would taste. And so I'm going to have to be speculative here. I can't know if my red is your red.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if there's evidence one way or the other.
Before Stephen Good, I had the distinct pleasure of hearing him when he spoke at the opening of the Hall of Man, which was kind of killed by the creationists, I understand. But his metaphor that if you replay the tape of evolution, you'll get a completely different result, has been challenged by the hyper kind of convergent theory of Simon Conway Morris. I was just wondering what you think of that controversy.
I knew somebody was going to bring up Conway Morris.
Pardon me?
I knew somebody was going to bring up Simon Conway Morris.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he created a problem with our project. He has deuterostomes. He has a Saccharinius, I think is the name, or Saccharinius, something like that. Is this a millimeter wide spherical animal that he identified as a deuterostome. And I read the study on it. He's the only one that did a study on it, his team. All of the other people on his team are in Japan, and I can't trace them, but he was the only one I could contact. So I sent a message to him asking, why did you classify this as a deuterostome? Since a deuterostome is identified by the asshole develops first, the anus develops first. Bunch of kids in the room, great job, Aron. Prior to that, it's a subset of nephrozoans, and nephrozoans have a through gut. Well, the problem with Saccharinius is it doesn't have an anus at all. So how did you decide that is a deuterostome? So I wrote the guy, and he refused to answer. So I contacted a number of other scientists who told me that the problem is that Simon Conway Morris is a Christian who has religious fixation on classifying things according to intelligent design. And so he can't classify this organism that he wanted to classify. You can't classify it as something that is extinct, as a whole phyla that is extinct, because that would defy intelligent designer. So he says that they're deuterostomes. Why? No reason. That's it. Is his religious conviction is the reason he classified it as such. So I notified a handful of other scientists and said, please study this thing so that somebody can have some kind of peer-reviewed material to stand against this guy. In the meantime, I'm taking it on my own accord. I'm not putting this thing in deuterostomes. It doesn't belong there. And it was also way too early for a deuterostome to be there either. So, strange thing, isn't it? I mean, the guy is a foremost authority in paleontology at I think Cambridge, and yet he classifies things as like the example you brought up for religious reasons that can't be justified.
So you don't think much of his theory of hyperconvergence? You would side more with Gould on if we replay the tape, we'd get something completely different? Contingency?
Well, there's going to be convergence, yes, but you're not going to get humans. You're not going to get all of the features that we have are all incidental. And you could get other things. You might have another race. Like once we're dead, I often make the joke that raccoons will take over. but they're not going to turn into us. And a lot of people want to render that it's like every race in the world always, or every race in the universe looks like people for whatever reason, when it shouldn't. There should be a race of jellyfish or lobsters or something like that, but people aren't very inventive.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one quick other question. Have you ever heard of Jerry Fodor, the philosopher who wrote a very infamous book about, the title was What Darwin Got Wrong?
I've heard of the title of that book, but I don't remember the person you're talking about.
Yeah,
Generally, philosophy, it just causes my eyes to roll back in my head.
He just died recently. He was a philosopher, and he started this whole idea of modularity of brain, but he didn't, it got, he split with the people that insist that we have a massively modular brain. But he said because there's genetic linkage and so much, sexual reproduction, that it's impossible for evolution to occur because you have all these genes linked, and if they're all linked, you're going to get deleterious genes linked to, what you want.
This is going to be a bigger conversation we can have later, but yeah.
Yeah.
I can't say that I agree with that statement, but I would like to argue with him. And unfortunately, that's no longer possible.
All right.
Yeah.
Hi, I was just wondering, when did you expect the Phylogeny Explorer Project to be completed and released to the public?
It'll never be completed.
Of course.
The very nature of the thing is that it's going to grow forever, and there will be new species to categorize before we're done with this that don't exist now. So it'll never be done. My goal, like I said, is to make it peer reviewed, and I think another side goal is to make it available to the public. And we meant to do that several months ago when I was in London, and we did this tetrapod zoology conference that was supposed to be the launch. But my team said, no, we're not quite ready yet. We don't have enough to show. So we have to get more involvement from the scientific community before we make it public.
Okay, thanks.
So I have two related questions here. Both involve Kent Hovind. One is, are you going to continue at all the response to him if he continues making videos, or is that completely definitively done?
Well, that's done, and he even announced that he's made his last video trying to respond to me. I will make another video pointing out that he didn't address any of the 12 things that I said. These are things you definitely got wrong and that you need to address and correct. He can't do that because his entire scam demands that he keep repeating those lies. We can prove all of these are lies, but this is his bread and butter, and you just can't make the same kind of living that he makes selling used cars, which is the only other thing he'd be good at.
So the second question is, are you going to make elephants and pine trees T-shirts to sell on your website?
No.
So you mentioned how gorillas and other apes have a flat top of their mouth, which means they can't communicate through speech. But so I've done some research, and there's been some gorillas that have been taught sign language, and you can carry on pretty good conversations with humans. And then how there's dolphins and how they have a somewhat sophisticated language that we're still trying to figure out, and how I was just wondering what your thoughts are on how we're sharing the planet with possible other possible intelligent species.
One illustration I like to bring up, arguing against intelligent design, is look at the other animals that are the most intelligent. Parrots and ravens, elephants, dolphins, and pigs. We'll put them in the category as well, because pigs are far more intelligent than dogs are. We generally give dogs a lot of credit for being smart. None of these animals have the ability to use that intelligence to improve upon. I mean, dolphins live underwater, right? Octopus, we can throw octopus in there too, but again, lives underwater. There's no way that they can take advantage of chemistry. They can't make complex tools. Elephants have one appendage they can manipulate things with. That's it, right? And it's not dexterous. So this is the reason I said that raccoons will take over. Raccoons have hands. They don't have a powerful brain. And another curious thing is raccoons don't evolve. There's a genetic test on raccoons that were not a genetic test, but a study that shows that their mutation rate is so slow they effectively don't evolve. There's got two kinds of raccoons in the world. You have the I think it's the coatimundi in South America, but then the raccoon that you have in North America is the same raccoon you have across Asia. They're the same thing. They just don't have very much mutation rate. They don't evolve. They're also karyotypic of procyonids, what the dawn of dogs, for example, would have looked like. So if somebody's going to intelligently design things, why would you put the most powerful brain in animals that, a pig with hooves? The hell's he going to do? Right? They can't explore things. They can't do things with that intelligence. And then you have an animal that has all that, and you give him a dog brain. That's frustrating. That's not an intelligent design. I would wish that I would rather see, other, what's the word should I use? Other species that are sapient as we are, at least to a degree that we could talk to them. I think that'd be great. We've all seen that going on in cartoons all the time. Just unfortunately hasn't happened in real life. Did I answer your question, or did I?
Kinda.
Okay.
But but yeah, with if you think that gorillas, how they can do sign language, and if they are, you would consider them to be at the level of intelligence as we are. And then with dolphins, there's been some, and it's still going on, where, because how they communicate is with in higher frequencies than we can actually hear, but we can pick it up on our devices, and how we've been able to communicate with dolphins, and not only, and it's more than just training like we would do with dogs, and how they can actually understand us.
Yeah. This sounds like another discussion we could have, but I need to get through the question feature. If that was a question, I don't know.
Well, if you think there's other, if you think they're the same, if there is
gorillas are not as intelligent as we are. There would have to be a lot of encephalization, and the problem that gorillas have is that they didn't have the myostatin mutation that diminished the amount of jaw muscle that we have, and that is what got rid of the sagittal crest. And when you didn't have that wrap of muscles into the sagittal crest, now you have room for the brain to grow. And so there was a number of connected mutations that had to happen in order to allow this to happen. And that's what gorillas would have to endure in order to become as intelligent as we are.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm curious, and you may have already answered this with the deuterostome question, but going through this phylogeny, is there any, this is more of a story question, is there any particular cryptozoology or any particular mythological finding or creature that you've been able to debunk using the Phylogeny Explorer, using this whole outline with other people?
No, I haven't debunked any cryptozoology that I can think of.
Okay.
I mean, the only cryptids that I can think of are things that should be dead, and people say they still see them alive.
Yeah.
But not my project hasn't had anything to do with that. No. Okay. Sorry.
First of all, very nice talk.
Thank you.
The question about, a very basic question I have about cladistics. You gave a very nice descriptive analysis of relatedness. But what are you basing on? Is it based, you seem to be duck rabbiting between morphology and genetics. And my issue here is, how are you deciding at what point a genetic mutation or genetic alteration becomes a different clade versus not? In other words, are we carving nature at the joints, or are we just making stuff up? Am I getting a piece of meat, or am I getting a piece of meat stuck with spleen and intestine? In other words, are these clades real things in the real world, or are we just making them up? In other words, how do you decide when one clade becomes another? Is it genetics, is it morphology, or a combination of both?
It's both, plus other things too. Embryology has a huge part to play in it. There's a number of evolutionary laws, and some of these apply in embryology, to one of them being that the closer two species are related, the more, or the two closely related species will look more similar in their neotenous state, or in their developing stages, than they do as adults, for example. And this follows an evolutionary pattern of how things started out being very similar and then grew apart.
But as you said yourself, we're often fooled by that. For example, pangolins and things like that. So we can't always go by that.
Not by morphology alone. No.
Correct. So what are you going by? I'm asking a very basic question about how you're deciding when a clade develops and when they separate.
The nice thing is that now we have genetics, which we can come up with a cladogram based on embryology and morphology, and now we can cross-confirm that. And usually the genetic test will show that, yeah, you got this right. But on rare occasions, in the examples that I just gave, I think are the only examples that I know of where genetics said, no, that's actually wrong. It needs to go this other way. And then the other example that I made up with the Eurypterids, for example, I think that that's another one where we're never going to have the genetics of Eurypterids. There's no way we can test that. But I think that there will be fossils in the future that challenge the arachnid classification that we have now.
I don't want to take up a lot of time, but the only other question I have is which genetics, which genes you're looking at, ribosomal RNA or something else?
Which genes?
Yeah. In other words, if you're trying to separate genetically from different clades, which genes are you looking at? All of them or a subset? And if a subset, which ones are you defining?
I'm hesitant to say all of them because we're usually only going by coding genes, but there have been long links established in non-coding genes as well. I mean, humans and rats, for example, have hundreds of codons of exact similarity. And then you'll have an interruption somewhere, and then you get, again, a complete match of hundreds of codons again.
Hi, Aron. Thanks for coming. My question for you today is, why do you think the United States among developed nations has the highest percentage of creationists as opposed to, other places in the developed world?
The Cold War. Yeah, that was a big part of it. I mean, the United States was, a number of groups within the U.S. wanted to paint an evil picture of atheists, for one thing. The only thing we got positive out of the Cold War was that we were matching our science to somebody else's science, and we were able to achieve great things with that, but our education fell apart. So that now we have fine colleges and universities, but all of our primary schools have fallen away. I mean, we should be the leader in the world's education, and we have no interest in being leaders. The biggest problem that I see with the communities in this country are that so many people are incurious. They don't care what the truth is. They just want to believe what they want to believe, and if that's a conspiracy theory, fine. I can't reach the people in my own family. They don't want to know what's real.
I know the feeling, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. I don't know how to close up. If somebody from the Secular Hub wants to come up and say, your final piece. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Aron. Thank you all for coming. Feel free to buy more alcohol and food here. Please do. Support Walnut Room. And again, there's merchandise outside. And if you want to know more about the Secular Hub or any of the groups that we're co-sponsoring tonight, you can obviously hang around and meet people from those groups and find out more. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.